10th and 11th. Losar is coming up on February 10th and 11th, and to remind people that it would be great if you can come to Dharma Surya in in Fairfax, Virginia. And I'm hoping to be there, and it would be nice to have a Buddha practice study contingent down there for the new year, and to be able to recite prayers with the Tibetans and wish everybody a happy Losar, and to raise prayer flags would be wonderful.
Lance,
Yes.
would that be on the 10th or the 11th is the Super Bowl, which I'm definitely watching. What about the 10th?
Well, I think it will be on the 10th. It usually is on the 10th, on the Saturday.
Oh, good. Is there going to be a notice or something about that?
Well, yeah, that's what I have to do, and I was busy today and I couldn't get to it. So if there probably has been a message already, and I haven't forwarded it to you.
Oh, good. Thank you.
So it's possible you've already gotten it if you're on the Dharma Surya web on their contact list.
I'm not. I'm sure I'm not.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you all for coming. I can see that John is with us tonight, and so that's all good. And everybody that's on YouTube, thank you for joining us. So tonight we're going to continue with our sutra study. So if you've got your sutra books, you've got the glossary handy, and you've got the book 1 of 1, which has chapters 1 through 10, will be good. And also our practice study book. So we'll start with our opening prayers. And would someone like to volunteer to recite the opening prayers? Okay, well, let me choose a volunteer then. Gunga, would you like to recite the opening prayers, please?
Altruistic motivation. All mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience. May they experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly I will establish them in the state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. All mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience. May they experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly I will establish them in the state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. Dagla dang war jai pedra, no par je pe geg, thar pa dang thum che kin pa bardu, cho par je pa thum che ki so jai pe, ma nam ka deng nyam pe sam chen, thum che da wa deng deng, dug now deng drill near du la na me pa, yang dag par zog pe jang chu rimpo che thor par jai. Action Bodhicitta prayer. Thus, until I achieve enlightenment, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Until death, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. From now until this time tomorrow, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. De che du sang magi, kai bar du lu nagi sum ge wa lo ka. Ma she bar du lu nagi sum ge wa lo ka. Du de ring ne sung te ne ma sang de sam gi bar du lu nagi sum ge wa la ko. Long refuge prayer. We take refuge in the kind root lamas and lineage lamas. We take refuge in the deities of the mandalas of the idams. We take refuge in all the exalted Buddhas. We take refuge in the perfect Dharma. We take refuge in the excellent order of the Sanghas. We take refuge in all the noble Dakas, Dakinis, and Dharma guardians, possessors of the eye of wisdom. We take refuge in the kind root lamas and lineage lamas. We take refuge in the deities of the mandalas of the idams. We take refuge in all the exalted Buddhas. We take refuge in the perfect Dharma. We take refuge in the excellent order of the Sanghas. We take refuge in all the noble Dakas, Dakinis, Dharma guardians, possessors of the eye of wisdom. Drin che sawa denge par che pe pa din lama dam pa nam la kap su chio. Yidam kyo korji la shog nam la kap su chio. Sange chom din de nam la kap su chio. Dam pe cho nam la kap su chio. Pak pe ke don nam la kap su chio. Pawo kadro cho kong su me shok ye sheki cheng dang dempa nam la kap su chio. Taking the Bodhisattva vow. Until I attain the heart of enlightenment, I take refuge in all the Buddhas. I take refuge in the Dharma and likewise in the assembly of the Bodhisattvas. As the previous Buddhas embraced the enlightened mind and progressed on the Bodhisattva path, I too, for the benefit of all sentient beings, give birth to bodhicitta and apply myself to accomplish the stages of the path. Until I attain the heart of enlightenment, I take refuge in all the Buddhas. I take refuge in the Dharma, likewise in the assembly of the Bodhisattvas. As the previous Buddhas embraced the enlightened mind and progressed on the Bodhisattva path, I too, for the benefit of all sentient beings, give birth to bodhicitta and apply myself to accomplish the stages of the path. Chang chub ning por chi kai bar, sange nam la kap su chi, jo dang chang chub sampai, sog la yang de shen kap su chi, jai tar nong gi de sheg tai, chang chub sub ni kai pa dang, chang chub sempe la pa la, de dag rim shen ne par tar, de shen dro la fen dan du, chang chub sen ni kai ki shing, de shen du ni la pa la, rim pa shen du la par gio. Short refuge prayers. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. Sanghi chodang sakhi chog namla, changchab bardu dagni kab suchi, dagchi jing sok taipe sonam ki, drola pinchir sanghe drab parshog. The Four Immeasurables. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness in the cause of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering in the cause of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness in the cause of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. Ma nam ka dang nyam pe sam chen tem chai dewa dang dewa gu dang den par gyer chik. Dugna dang dugna ki ko dang dra war gyer chik. Dugna me pe dewa dang ni dra war gyer chik. Nai ring chak dang ni dang dra wei tang nam la ne par gyer chik. 100-syllable purification mantra of Vajrasattva. Om, Vajrasattva Samaya. Help to protect me, I vow to purify myself. May you remain firm with me. Grant me the complete satisfaction. Grow with me. Be loving towards me. Grant me the attainment to master the powers beyond body and nature. Show me all the deeds of body, speech, and mind. Make my mind and heart good, virtuous, and auspicious. Revel in the bliss of the four joys. O Blessed One, who embodies the essence within me, do not abandon me. Grant me the realization of the indestructible nature. Make me one with you. Thus I signify my unity with non-duality. Ah. Om Vajrasattva Samaya Manu Palaya Vajrasattva Tenopa Tishka Drito Mebawa Suto Kyo Mebawa Supo Kyo Mebawa On Rakto Me Bawa, Sarvo Siddhi Me Tasha. Sarva Karma Sutsame, Sisam Shriya Kuru Hum, Ha 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 Ho, Bhagawan, Sarva Tathagata, Bhadra Mama Mansa, Bhadri Baba, Maha Samaya Sataya Ah. Bhadra Sataya, Samaya, Manu Palaya, Bhadra Sattva Tenopa, Tista Drito Mebawa, Sudo Kyo Mebawa, Supo Kyo Mebawa, Anu Rakto Mebawa, Sarva Siddhi Me Prayascha. Sarva Karma Sutsame, Sisan Shriya Kuru Hum, Ha 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 Ho, Bhagawan, Sarva Tathagata, Bhadra Mame Manse, Bhadri Pawa, Maha Samaya Sattva Ha. Bhadra Satvaya, Samaya, Manu Palaya, Bhadra Sattva Tenopa, Chista Drino Mibawa, Suto Kyo Mibawa, Supo Kyo Mebawa, Anu Rakto Mebawa, Sarva Siddhi Mepra Yasha. Sarva Karma Same, Tisan Shriya Kuru Hum, Ha 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 Ha, Bhagawan, Sarva Tathagata, Bhadra Mama Mansa, Bhadri Bhawa, Maha Samaya Sattva Ah. Sagaramati requested sutra. Likewise, be extinguished. Extinguish all enemies to my purpose. Whatever evil forces are in me, be defeated. Do this so that when I am victorious, all pure radiance melts into me, completely purified. Take all this knowledge, food, and drink, peacefully enjoy it, and be satisfied so that all obstacles may be destroyed. Be liberated from all obstacles, all general obstacles. Maras are defeated by this gesture of the Buddha. By reciting this mantra, may all the Maras be purified. As a result, may all the Maras be defeated.
Very good. Thank you very much. Thank you. We've been introducing each other here during this session, during our 101 session. So if I can ask Debbie if she could spend a couple of minutes, please, introducing yourself and what your Dharma practice has been, or what your past experience has been, what you've been doing, in terms of Dharma for the past number of years. So if you could spend a couple minutes doing that, I'd appreciate it. We'd all like to hear from you. Debbie, your microphone is muted.
I'm telling this great story to myself then. No, I'm going to start, I guess, at the beginning. When I was 10 years old, I mean, I had always had spiritual stuff. So my mother read a fair amount of Hermann Hesse and had introduced to me to who he is or was a German author who did a lot of very interesting spiritual work. And so he looked at the spiritual aspects of Europe, but he also wrote a book called Siddhartha, which is, his take, but it was, it was about the Buddha, and he wrote this great book, Journey to the East, which was sort of an interesting melding of the two. So, we talked about this stuff a lot. And so one random day she was going out, she's like, hey, there's this really good book, Journey to the East by Hermann Hesse. And I'm like, yeah, let me read it. And it's not that long. It's only like 100 pages. And we read like we breathe. So when she got home, we talked about it. And then she gave me Siddhartha, which that got me interested, right? It's something I've always paid attention to. The nature and structure of reality. I am a scientist. I was a scientist to be a scientist. I was raised by, my mother, who had a scientific background, but also spiritual. And we're a weird family. You had to read a lot, and you had to, that's just the way we were. And so I paid attention to that, and I always had. And I read Taoism, but Buddhism is something that was always tugging me. And then I went to New Mexico, and decided to study anthropology because it was a logical thing to do at the time. So I am a Native Americanist. So I read in Native American history and anthropology. And for my master's thesis, I looked at the Crown Point rug auction, which is a rug auction. But also what I did was, I had a Navajo and Kiowa and other friends and had those, don't tell anybody, but it was like a conversion experience. And so I started to practice Navajo religion and a little bit of Pueblo religion. And that explained a lot about reality, but Buddhism has always been tugging. And every time I looked at Tibetan script, I'm like, yeah, I should be able to read that. And this was the 90s, and a group of Tibetan refugees had come to Santa Fe, and I lived in Albuquerque and Santa Fe at the time. And it was a great place for Tibetan refugees because they liked the mountains. So that's what drew me in while I was still in New Mexico. In 2000, I moved to the DC area and looked on the internet, and there was Kempo Konchak. Gyaltsen. He was a Kempo at the time. He's Kenshin now, but he was Kempo at the time. And I was living up in Maryland, and I'm like, okay. And this was in 2001. And, I've never looked back. And he's a fantastic teacher and hilarious, but he's a fantastic teacher. And I took my vows from him. And I studied under him when he came in, Drupal, who again is amazing. And then when I moved to Virginia, it was difficult to get up there. So it was practicing on my own. And then, the people who, there were a couple of interesting, things that I saw. But at some point, right, Dharma Surya, started up, and so I just sort of ran with it. So that is my history of Buddhism. So I took my Drikung Kanju vows in 2001. And I am theory oriented and do a lot of when you're text meditation, analytical meditation. And the thing about Drikung Kaju is it's a practice lineage, and was drawn to that even though it is like the more theoretical lineage is it's Gelugpa, which is the Dalai Lama's lineage. So sometimes people are like, well, maybe you need to be Gelugpa. I'm like, no, that's not my strength. If you don't practice it, it is not real, right? It has to happen together. Theory and practice have to inform each other. And there are things you will not discover, really important things you'll not discover if you do not do the practice. And a very good example is Gachin Rinpoche, who is, everybody says he's amazing. He's completely amazing. But when he teaches a lot, he will say, I don't have a lot of theory. I don't have a lot of knowledge, because he learned Buddhism when he was in prison. And he's a bodhisattva. His level of realization is really amazing, but it is practice-based. And again, don't say this to anybody, but I think Khenpo Samdo is his heart son. And Khenpo has both. He has an incredibly deep, complex understanding of the theory of it and of the practice, because he learned from Garchin. And so being exposed to them as teachers is just amazing. So yeah, that's me. I'm just trying, like, we have amazing teachers. And we're not Buddhism is complicated. There's a lot to learn. You have to give up your ego. It takes a long time. It is surprising. You feel like there are setbacks, but it's definitely worth it. And it definitely accumulates over time. So that's my story.
Very good. Thank you. Just one question I have, and that is, in your busy time, because I know you're working and you have family obligations and like that, do you get time to do practice yourself at home?
It focuses on refuge in terms of the practice, and then meditation. You can't live without that. And again, it's the lineage. Right? We are, those people are, all the people, they were all people at one point, right? Going through this. So even when somebody dies like Jintasunga, it's not like they've evaporated from the universe. You have to maintain that connection to them. And one of the things that Kempo said is, there are some times when you may not practice every day, but every day you have to take refuge. And if you take refuge, you are connecting to the lineage, to your practices.
And how do you take refuge?
I will do, I'll take the refuge prayer. And then
The refuge prayer that we recite in our opening prayers.
yes, I will do that basically. And then in terms of, it's hard to explain. We're connected to these, we're connected to people like you, people like Kempo and Garchin, and connected to the lineage through our experiences. So that is what I focus on. There is an unbroken string that runs between all of us, straight through every Buddhist who has practiced to Buddha Shakyamuni and beyond. And you have to open yourself to that. And it's not, so there are words, but it's not just meditation. It is, you're never alone. I'm never alone. I'm always in a crowd. There is no, it's already here. And when I go into I work in DC, once a week. The Smithsonian, they got this wonderful altar. This woman from New York City amassed this amazing collection. She made her house into a shrine, and then she donated it to the Smithsonian. So I can walk over there, and it is a gompa. There is a statue of Jinten Sungan. You're in the presence of this, and I'm just a tiny little speck in the face of this amazing source, this never-ending source of bodhicitta. It's just easy to connect that way. So when I have those experiences, I keep that connection here. So even if it's just like 5 minutes of meditating, it's to reach out to, and we're all one. It was always right there.
Very good. Thank you. Does anybody have any question for Debbie?
I know I'm a freak, but that's just the way I am.
Lance, this is Sarah. Debbie, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I want to just, Lance, thank you for having people like give some background. I find it really, I'm just grateful to be able to listen to Bernie last week, and I love everything you just shared. It's beautiful. Like theory and practice go together, and I completely agree with that. So I loved hearing you describe your journey. And I really found it refreshing that you were just as you were talking about the practicality of your day, about like taking a moment to seek refuge. And Lance, thank you for asking her to expand upon that, because I think that's a struggle for a lot of people in like raising a family or getting through your day in the Western culture and still exploring the spiritual system that resonates so deeply with us without constantly being pulled into the chaos. Like, how are people who've been doing this, you, Bernie, Debbie, like the wisdom you're sharing, like how have you navigated this, right? Like passing that to like Matt or myself or Alex, right? To help us, because it feels so almost impossible at times to do all this. So thank you.
Oh, no, you're right. And it actually reminds me of something. One of the things that Kempo Salvador talked to us about, Mahamudra, the practice of Mahamudra, it's very core to, what we do. There's refuge and offering and the mandala offerings and then the Diya Yoga and all these visualizations. And there are these 5 steps. And he said, you know what? You don't have to do it all at once. It's perfectly fine for you to start the day with refuge. And then you do your offerings. And then, because that's reality. And so what I did was I have Mahamudra and other practices on my phone. So that if I'm going to go into work and be on a bus or the metro, I have it right here. And so you can literally integrate it into your day. And there was a monk, I can't remember his name. I have a book of his that I picked up from the airport, and we're talking. I said, I was on the metro in DC. The subway's called the metro. I was on the metro, and it's at the end of the day. It's very crowded, and I'm trying to, I'm getting through that section, and I said, oh no, I was doing the mandala offering, and there's a lot going on. I'm just like, screw it, basically. I'm like, I get off, we get in the station, and I get, in the station, I put my feet, I'm like, this is a Buddha field. I am in a Buddha field. Everybody around me is a Buddha. We're all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. This subway station is a Buddha field. And everybody and everything is helping me with this. This is an offering. Everything is pure. And he said, yeah, that was a great idea. So it's like to have, so you can do it in just the weirdest ways. You can, if there's a mantra that resonates with you, for me, the Heart Sutra, gate paras, gate parasam, gate bodhisvaha. For me, that really helps with emptiness. When I am walking around saying that mantra, everything is like, you can see how fake everything is. Like, it's clearly empty. And just, there are just ways that you kind of tag your, the things that you do, the mantras, the visualization of emptiness, looking around. Another, like for bodhicitta, I'm sorry to take up so much time, but for bodhicitta, communing is great because everybody's unhappy, everybody's suffering. Even if they have a smile on their face, you can see it. Everybody's got that, like, this is not what we're supposed to be doing, right? My true nature is to not sit on a subway and then sit in an office for 9 hours. And again, generating compassion for everyone and everything around you. Very easy to do when you're dealing with stressed commuters. So there's yeah.
Very good. I like hearing, your real experience. Does anybody else have a question?
I do.
Yes.
Debbie, when you had mentioned what you were saying about never being alone, or is what you meant that you have that connection with the lineage, so you're always surrounded by that or part of that? Is that what you meant when you said that?
Yeah, the lineage, the Tathagatas, and then you guys.
Mm.
The separation between you and me is not real. And you meditate that, and then it kind of takes over your life. We're never we're never alone.
Yeah, it's a really that was a really cool idea that really hit me when you said that. And and making me think too of like yeah, that we can be like actually part of the lineage or connected with the lineage, because I don't know, I don't really think about it too much, but there's a part of me I think that feels like I'm not really like in the lineage of like the Buddha or these masters or the tradition or something, because I'm like a Westerner and I'm, it's kind of like I'm trying to practice, but I'm not really, I don't think of it consciously that way. But now that I think about it, but it's like, I mean, it's not like the Buddha was Tibetan, I don't know why I would have to be any less. Not that I'm a great practitioner, but in terms of being in the lineage or part of the lineage. No, those are my thoughts. That was a very beautiful way of putting that. I liked how you said that. That really hit me.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, again, I'm sorry I'm talking so much.
Anybody else? I don't want to cut anybody off. Everybody should have a chance to talk.
Well, Lance, I'll say a few things. First of all, I apologize for being late tonight. Lance, you first introduced Debbie as a Dharma sister, and I thought, wow, that sounds really cool. That's right on. And it's great to have a Dharma sister like Debbie. I love what you were saying tonight, so thank you. And it's no surprise that you talked about this group and how important it is. And of course, we take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, which is us. And so that's very poignant for me. That's it. Thanks, Lance.
You're welcome. Thank you. Okay. Well, unless somebody else has something you'd like to say right now, we'll get into the sutra. So I hope everybody's got your book, book 1, and if you can open up to chapter 1, the setting. So we're gonna, if you want to go back and look at the introduction, I certainly recommend that. But I think we need to really dive into the actual text of the translation of the sutra itself. The introduction is, a compilation of what these people are kind of making examples of and so on. But this, the text is an honest, straightforward translation of what is the Tibetan language of these sutras. So the setting here. So I think the best thing I'm going to do is I'm going to read a little bit, and then I'm going to ask somebody else to read. So, and then somebody else to read. So try and get active in doing this, making a connection with the sutra. The best way is by reading it, so I don't know if you guys are reading it on your own during the week or anything like that, but I certainly encourage that. But through this, maybe you'll have more motivation to want to do that, to see that how beneficial it is, to hear the language and so on, the way it's expressed and so on. So I'm going to start by reading the setting. So this is talking about what the environment is, how this is starting. Remember, this is the play in full, the Lalitavistara Sutra. So this is the life story of the Buddha. So here's the setting. It says, "Homage to all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Thus did I hear at one time. The Blessed One was staying in Shravasti at Jeta Grove, in the park of Anathapindadata, along with the great Sangha of 12,000 monks." So I'm not going to go into this next paragraph and read the next paragraph because I fracture the language too bad for me to be able to do it. But I do want to point out that this line where it says, "Thus did I hear at one time," because what this is implying, what this is saying, that the translators or translator did not live at this time, was not with the Buddha directly at this time. These sutras were written a couple of hundred years after the Buddha, after he passed. So it came from recollection, and it came from a bunch of his disciples coming together and agreeing on how these sentences and so on were to be structured. So thus did I hear at one time is saying, this is what I heard. The Blessed One is Buddha Shakyamuni. The Blessed One was staying at Shravasti at Jeddah Grove. So this is a famous place that he came to many, many, many years in a row. He would come during the summertime, during the monsoon season. And the king who lived in this land at this time constructed this great big pavilion for the Buddha. And many, many, many disciples would come and travel with him and would stay there and so on. So this is where he is at this particular time in Jeddah Grove, and he's going to give testimony as to what this is a little bit later in the sutra. We're going to read this maybe tonight. We're going to see what this is. So first is setting up the setting, and then to see where it comes from the Buddha. So you can imagine that this pavilion might be like having some kind of a floor, but the floor may be covered with some kind of rugs or something like that. Maybe not. Maybe it's just grass. It's not concrete or anything like that. And it probably it's got a roof over it, and it probably has some kind of pillars that are supporting the roof. And it's all open. There's no windows. It's not an enclosure. It's a pavilion. So this is the environment. And it says that he's in this park with a great Sangha of 12,000 monks. So is 12,000 monks, is that a metaphor? We can't say for sure. Maybe there was 12,000 monks there, but it was a lot of monks. We can say that. And then it goes on and mentions in this next paragraph, it lists all these monks who were his primary disciples. So among them, just a few names that pop out at me is Shariputra was there, and Kashyapa was there, and Subhatu was there, and Purna was there, and Maha Moggallana was there. So a lot of these monks that you read about in stories about the Buddha were all there. So then this next paragraph, 1.3, it says, along with these monks were 32,000 bodhisattvas, 32,000 bodhisattvas, all of whom had only a single birth remaining and were adept in all the perfections of the bodhisattvas. They enjoyed all the super knowledges of the bodhisattvas and had attained all the dharanis and all the confidence of the bodhisattvas. So the question here is, are these bodhisattvas, are they human beings? Or are they human beings who have gotten to a point of being very transcendent? And their body is the illusory body, it's truly the illusory body. They're not, you don't see them. Ordinary beings don't see them. Is it something like that? So in any case, they're spiritual. They're spiritual beings, human beings who have this spirituality of sort of like being transcending the normal human sense that we might have, the senses of being able to see them, hear them, and so on like that. This next line I want to refer to is the super knowledges. So I just want to, I got a note here. Whoops. Where is that? Sorry. I'd said last week, that sometimes we can use the glossary to reference, some of these words that we don't know, but we can also use Google, because Google's gotten quite good about these things. And I'm looking up something, I thought I had saved it, but what these super knowledges are. Let's see if what's in the book here. Does it have super knowledges?
Lance, can I ask you a question while you're
Yeah, sure.
searching? What is a Dharani? They said they had attained all the Dharanis.
A Dharani is a long mantra.
Okay.
It's like a longer song, if you will. And the mantras that we accumulate, that we recite, are very short ones that are derived from the Dharanis. So a Dharani would be like a longer, much longer mantra, a longer song. And they're in Sanskrit. You know, so when we do the Medicine Buddha, for instance, there is a long mantra, there's a long Dharani that we recite. And then after that, then we recite the short mantra. We accumulate the short mantra. So that's
Okay.
the example of a Dharani.
Thank you.
Yes. Sorry, I'm still looking for this. Let me try it this way.
Yeah, it's not in the glossary.
No, it's not.
Lance, can I read something from the introduction while you're
Yes.
set up
Yeah, what do you got?
in case it's useful for people? Because it was useful for me, just like
Yeah.
these paragraphs that gave good context to it for me. Some of which you were saying, like the different numbers and everything that comes up. It says, this brings up another important feature of the play in full, which is the ahistorical Mahayana backdrop that informs the entire storyline. Throughout the text, the story is covered by a lattice work of mind-boggling miracles and feats that defy comprehension by the ordinary intellect. Clearly, in the perspective of the Mahayana, the world is fashioned according to the lenses that we use to see with. And here, in the play in full, the lenses are those of full and complete awakening. This fact is already alluded to in the title of the text, which describe the events in the Bodhisattva's life as a play. As such, the events in the Bodhisattva's life are not ordinary karmic activity that unfold based on the mechanisms of a conceptual mind, but rather the playful manner in which the non-conceptual wisdom of a 10th level Bodhisattva unfolds as an expression of his awakened insight. In this manner of storytelling, the reader is invited into the worldview of a timeless and limitless universe as perceived by the adepts of the Mahayana. The time span, numbers, and sizes within this Mahayana scripture are so persistently overwhelming that all historical and scientific thinking as we know it eventually loses meaning and relevance. Just like 2 more sentences. As such, the play in full is not a historical document, and it was probably never intended to be. Instead, is it a story of awakening that itself contains all the key teachings of the Mahayana. It goes on a little bit there, but that helped me a lot in terms of relating to some of the features of, like you were talking about, the Mahayana text and the numbers and everything that seems like so mind-boggling and everything that put it into a good perspective. So I made note of that. Hopefully that's useful to someone. Thank you.
Yes, and that's great. You know, this is the discussion that I think we should be having. This is the whole point of our doing this, is to get everybody interested in adding something to the conversation. You know, it's just not a monologue, just reading from this. It's reading something from it, but then having a discussion about it, referring to different things that maybe we've read in other places and so on. So thank you very much for that, Matt. Bernie, I see you turned your microphone on. Did you want to say something?
Okay, if you were looking for the super knowledges, I remember from the past that the Sanskrit for that is Abhijñā, and that has a listing in the Encyclopedia of Buddhism, and they're pretty similar to what I said in the Mahamudra class last week. They are the first, there are the miraculous powers such as walking on water and passing through solid objects. The second is the divine eye, which is the ability to see things from afar and the karmic results of actions. The divine ear, the ability to hear from afar. Ability to remember one's former lives. The mind-penetrating knowledge, which is knowledge of other states of mind. And there's a sixth, which is the property of enlightened beings, which is knowledge of the extinction of the contaminants, it says here, which is the ashravas, the defilements is how I would put it. So that's what it says in the Encyclopedia of Buddhism.
Can you spell that? The same,
Abhijna?
yeah.
Okay, that's ABHIJN with the tilde on top. And the last letter is A. So it's Abi generally means superior, and Jna means knowledge or wisdom sometimes. So it's Abhijna.
Well, very good. That's great. Thank you. So you can see this is a little bit of mind bending, for our ordinary minds, that these are human beings who have evolved or have attained these levels of transcendence and have these characteristics, have these super knowledges, have these qualities, and so on. They engage in certain activities that for us would be impossible, but for them is something that they do without even thinking about it. It's effortless. So here, continuing with this paragraph, it says, these great bodhisattvas, they have completed all the aspirations of the bodhisattvas, the holy enlightened beings. They understood and realized all discriminating knowledges of the bodhisattvas. In other words, all the intellectual investigation that the bodhisattvas have done, they understand that and have gained mastery over the absorptions of the bodhisattva, so that they have absorbed all this prajna paramita, all this perfection of wisdom, and that this is their nature. This is who they are. They're like one step away from being a Buddha, but yet they're still an ordinary human being who is very close to crossing over to becoming a Buddha. They had obtained all the powers of the bodhisattvas and dealt with all the patience of the bodhisattvas. And that's one of the things that we are confronted with right now. How much patience do we have? Oh, I want this right away. Where's the shortcut to this? Is there one prayer I can recite over and over again and attain enlightenment? How many times do you hear somebody say that in a Dharma center? A new person coming in. Well, what's the quick way to do this? Everybody doesn't have patience, but we learn slowly that we are developing patience. We have to use patience. It's part of the process, because the patience is helping us to be able to learn for ourselves, the dualistic nature and so on. We have to see the non-virtue. We have to see the virtue. We have to see the negative. We have to see the positive. We have to see the confusing. We have to see the easy stuff. We have to go through all that to become a master of it. It's not something that we just plug in and get mastery over. It's something that we have to expose ourselves to, and then we have to learn how to manage that, how to control that. So patience is a key in being able to do that. So it says, indeed, each one of them had completed all the bodhisattva grounds. So we talked about the ground, then the path that we go on to become enlightened, to be liberated, and then the fruition of that path is the result of that path. And we find that in the end, we find that we had all the ingredients, everything that we needed was at the ground level, but we hadn't recognized it as such. So, but with the confidence that what we're doing is a repeatable, progressive system, should be able to fuel our patience to be able to learn to do this and so on. So in this lifetime, we're going to get so far, but maybe some of us will get very far, and some of us will become true bodhisattvas on a high level path and so on. Maybe someone here will be a Buddha in a single lifetime. But for the rest of us, we see that it's taken us lifetimes to get to where we are right now. It's taken us this lifetime and however many years, 50 years or 30 years or 60 years or 70 years of being a human being in this lifetime to get to where we are, and that there's lifetime after this. Maybe not as who we look like and what our names are, but in the human experience, that we are transpersonal. We don't look at it that it's only me. It is I am part of all this transpersonal, and I'm adding to that transpersonal what would you say? Incredible group, for lack of a better word right now.
Lance, I had a question. This is Zara. I had just a quick question. I was listening to yesterday's teachings, which were great, and you were describing like the process at the end of like the sequence of like you said like in our culture people want the shortcuts, they want the sexy version to get to their spirituality, but like you're like if you don't do it right, it's like building a house on straw, like it quickly falls apart. So in line with that and what you're talking about now, like, has there ever been any documentations where people can remember like in a previous lifetime or previous reincarnation where they got to a certain point and now they're picking up where they left off and they're just like inserting and they've already gone through certain aspects of the sequence, like that whole structure and process, and they're coming back in with intention as they are reborn, knowing like this is where I kind of left off and my soul needs to continue working here from my previous lifetime. Is that something that's possible, or you wouldn't know? You wouldn't be able to actually even remember that?
Well, I'll leave it to anybody want to answer that question? Do you
Debbie,
remember?
Bernie?
Do you remember a
I'm
past
dying
life?
for that.
Do you remember a past life?
Can
Well,
anybody remember?
but because I don't know if this happens to you when you're meditating and so your brain, or even if you're not, your brain tells you something that's absolutely true. And for me, it's always like somebody speaking. You have access to the highest level of realization you have ever had in all your lifetimes. It's already there. You just have to find it. So that, I think that's accurate. It's there. It is true that it's really, really hard to access past lifetimes. There's a lot of people that claim more than I could possibly ever do. I've only gotten a few insights, but that was one of them. It's like, that's your mind. You may have forgotten it in this lifetime, but you've already done it. So go and find it. It's already happened, right? And that's another thing we don't really think about in terms of time. We have such a short lifetime. But you've been bouncing around for how long? Right? How many thousands of years have we been going around? Yeah. And I don't think any of us are here by accident. I think we're all doing something that we've done before. So yeah, I think it's I try to find it, but I think yeah, you've already got it. Just find it.
So I've actually connected with a past life experience before, and I learned that in this particular past life, I was a monk of sorts, someone following a particular path. I don't know if it's Buddhism, Hinduism, whatever, but definitely in the Eastern region of the world. And my group was being persecuted. And I went against my master and my fellow monks, practitioners, whatever you want to call them. And I chose safety and monotony and renouncing my monkhood to avoid death. So this lifetime, I have realized that sticking to a sense of spirituality is requiring a lot more courage, and also just like sharing it with others requires a lot of courage as well, and getting over a sense of shame of having some kind of spiritual foundation. But having learned that past life experience, I'm now more aware of patterns that I don't want to fall back into, if that makes sense. So it has helped me in my commitment in order to gain this spiritual foundation. And in this lifetime, I choose Vajrayana. So I don't really know if I'm making sense, but
No,
that's
that's
basically
good.
my experience.
That's very good. Thank you.
Mhm.
Bernie, you have your mic on. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, well, you hear stories. I don't have anything personal. I don't remember my previous lives, unfortunately. Uh, but you hear stories like I heard a story about a guy who was in school, and his school organized a trip to Tibet, and he went to the Barkor, which is the temple in the middle of Lhasa, and he saw other people doing prostrations. So he started doing prostrations himself, and as while he was doing them, he had some sort of enlightenment or breakthrough while he was doing the prostrations, and he'd never practiced before. So I don't know, just thought I would pass on that story since people like to hear stories like that. So
For myself, I like to say that, we've all, when we were kids and teenagers and so on in school, we were reading books and so on, and maybe having some kind of empathy with the characters in the book or something. And I used to like reading about Indian Americans and Native Americans and what it was like, for them, in the year 1300 or something like that, before the Europeans came. And I could kind of have these transpersonal thoughts about it. I'd be laying in bed and thinking about it, or I'd be reading a book and thinking about it, and so on. And later on, when I started writing, and I remember, I would get in these kind of like, for lack of a better word, excuse me, but a meditative kind of a state, where you start getting this stream of consciousness going and everything. And I imagined, at least that my back was on the stone, looking up at the moon, the sunlit moon. And I said, what does that mean? That line came to me. What does that mean? I said, well, maybe I was being sacrificed as part of the Mayan or the Incas or something like that. And so whether, it wasn't Lance, I can tell you that, but it was a human experience that I tuned into. And I look at it like that. I look at it, there's all this human experience that goes on that we can tune into. If it becomes as literal as being able to say, oh, my name was Ashnash, in 700 AD, and I was sacrificed one night, I don't know if you can be that literal about it. There are some people that say you can. I can't argue that. But I think at the very least, you can have that empathetic, a transpersonal experience by letting yourself go and imagining these things. That's what all this is. All this is, imagination. All this stuff is appearances. That's what the emptiness is. It really doesn't exist. We make it exist through our wanting it to be real and so on. But if we just let ourselves go and be able to see that we're all the same in this, and that we choose, our suffering, we choose our exaltation of be able to get beyond the suffering, then those are tools. Those are mechanisms that we use to be able to recognize how it is that we got to where we are. All right, let me carry on with the next.
Thank you, Lance. Thank you, Lance. Thank
You're
you.
welcome. Thank you. I've often thought of myself as a German soldier in World War II. So let me go to the next page here. At 1.3, continuing, it says, foremost among them, talking about the Bodhisattvas, were the Bodhisattva, the great being Maitreya, the Bodhisattva, great being Dharani Nishvari Raja, the Bodhisattva, great being Simhata Ketu, the Bodhisattva, great being Siddhartha Mati, the Bodhisattva, great being Prashani, I'm not even going to try that one. The Bodhisattva, great being Prati, and I'm not going to skip over that, and Bodhisattva, great being Naradi Kuta, and the Bodhisattva, great being Mahakaruna Khandran. So it's just pointing out, that there were some very high evolved, if you will, bodhisattvas that were present at this time that the Buddha was able to recognize. So the names, when I first started reading stuff like this, and to try and fathom out each one of these names becomes a lot of time and effort. And I don't know, I made a choice to say, I don't need to know these names right now. It's more important to read through and get the meaning of what the sentence is, what the paragraph is, what the section is, whatever it is. It's more important to know that than to know these individual names. If I want to come back later on and focus on those names because there's reason to do that, well, I can do that. But right now, my purpose is to get the overall general meaning of what's trying to be conveyed here. Does that make sense? Bernie, what do you think of that?
Generally, when they talk about reading a text in a foreign language, they say first thing you should do is read it over generally and get a sense, and then return to the parts that you didn't understand and try to figure them out. So first, you should read something at least twice, the first time for a general understanding and the second time to fill in the details. So it's more or less, I agree with you.
Okay, very good. Thank you. I'm trying to give everybody confidence in the way to approach this. Okay, so now 1.4. At that time, the Blessed One dwelt in the city of Shravasti, where he was revered by his fourfold retinue, as well as by king, princes, royal ministers, vassal kings, and attendants. Likewise, his followers among the military, the priests, the merchants, the householders, and the royal court revered him. Both city dwellers and all those who lived in the countryside, as well as the adherents of extremist philosophies, ascetics, priests, logicians, and wandering hermits, all revered him. He was treated as their master and showed great respect. So I think this is showing an overall picture of who this being was, the Blessed One, Buddha Shakyamuni, looking at his life in a retrospect and being able to say that he was revered by all these common beings. They may have been kings, they may have been, lowly craftspeople or whatever, merchants or whatever, but they all had a reverence for him.
Just to jump in for a second, it's good to remember these are caste-based societies.
True.
So it's very salient for those guys, yeah.
And I think maybe that might have been revered by the fourfold retinue. Maybe that was a reference to the caste system, because I think there were 4 castes, weren't they? Well, without getting too much hung up in that. But anyway. So I'm just going to read this last bit, and I'm going to ask somebody else to read. It says, presented with offerings, the Blessed One received abundant savory food and drink, robes, alms bowls, bedding, healing medicines and remedies, and other appropriate necessities. Yet the great wealth and renown he enjoyed were like drops of water rolling off the petals of a lotus flower. The Blessed One remained detached and untainted by it all. So all these beings were making offerings to him. And this went to something that we discussed last week. Somebody brought up the idea of offerings. and that's a very healthy thing to be doing and so on. And so it's good for us to be able to make offerings to someone who is working for us, that is doing things for us, is showing us great compassion and so on. And for that being to be a pure being, that the offerings, they're not doing it for the sake of the offerings. You know, the offerings are just rolling off their back, like it says here, like raindrops off the back of a lotus flower. So it's showing the way this dynamic works. It's important for us to make the offerings, but it's effortless. It's common for them to not even say, okay, you know, that's great, thank you, and it becomes a blessing to accept the offerings. You know, we make the offerings, and to let people make offerings. You know, that's a blessing too for those people, because they need to show that gratitude. So that becomes a blessing. That becomes compassion.
Lance, what verse are you on?
Tashi, we're on 1.5.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
In the setting, chapter 1, 1.5.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Tashi just joined us. He came from another meeting he was in.
Yeah.
All right. Well, then, if you don't mind, I'm going to ask somebody else to read. Anybody has questions, you know, just speak right up, raise your hand, whatever. So if the reader can keep an eye on the screen, that would be really good. So, Brendan, I'm going to ask you if you would read 1.5, please. These next couple paragraphs.
I would be happy to, and I'm fascinated with 1.4 as to what an adherent of extremist philosophies would be. That's very cool, but I'll wonder about that a little bit. And I'll start
wait a minute. No, that's a good. Where is that?
1.4
Yeah.
says both city dwellers and those who lived in the countryside, as well as the adherents of extremist philosophies, ascetics, priests, logicians, and wandering hermits, also revered him.
So I think it's referring to the opposition.
Okay.
Those who have other views. You know, everybody was at the very least impressed with the Buddha.
All right.
Also, it refers to like materialists and nihilists. Those were considered extreme philosophies that are not the middle way.
Yeah.
So nothing really matters versus everything is just material. Okay, got it.
Or they might refer to monotheists, you know, that there's a creator or something. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Could be applied to today's society too, in terms of political views.
Oh, yeah.
Certainly. Yeah. 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 To accept everybody, to have tolerance, you know, for different views and so on, and to be able to bring it all in, and through the process of purification, you know, and bringing light to it, love, compassion, bodhicitta, you know, we find the middle way. So, Brendan, will you read?
As the Blessed One's fame spread throughout the world, he became known by various names and epithets, such as the Blessed One, the Worthy One, the perfectly and completely awakened One, he who is both wise and virtuous, the well-gone One, the knower of the world, the peerless guide, who tames beings, the teacher of gods and men, and the Blessed Buddha. Endowed with the fivefold vision, the Blessed One taught the inhabitants of this and other worlds, each with its gods, Mara, Brahma, monks, nuns, and priests. To all these beings, gods and humans alike, he taught what he himself had realized, and what he had thereby actualized and accomplished. The teachings he gave were virtuous in the beginning, virtuous in the middle, and virtuous in the end. Sublime in both word and meaning, the Dharma he taught was at once distinct, complete, pure, and wholesome. He taught all these beings how to live a life of purity.
Okay, very good. Thank you. So the fivefold vision, you can see that in the glossary, and it's G188, if you care to look at that. But it says these comprise the eye of the flesh, the eye of the divine clairvoyance, the eye of wisdom, the eye of Dharma, and the eye of the Buddhas. So all these phrases that, we may not right off the bat know what they mean, there's references that we can go to that will help us to clarify that. So it takes time to do it. The invitation is there for us to do it. So I just want to point out here, as Brendan just read in that last paragraph of that section 1.5, it says the teachings he gave were virtuous in the beginning, virtuous in the middle, and virtuous in the end. So what does virtue mean? Does virtue mean truth? And was it right? Was it correct? What does virtue mean? Maybe there's a reference here in the glossary. I haven't turned to it, but it may explain it. But it's just showing the purity of it, that it was all pure virtue. And that's one of the things that we are learning through the Dharma is virtue and non-virtue. Non-virtue begets suffering. Virtue begets happiness. Sublime in both word and meaning, the Dharma he taught was at once distinct, complete, pure, and wholesome. He taught all these beings how to live a life of purity. So this is, I think, very meaningful. So Zara, would you mind reading 1.6 and 1.7? Oh, wait a minute, just read 1.6, and then the next thing gets into a quotation. So read that, please, Zara.
Lance, I apologize. I'm driving right now. I won't be able to read tonight.
Oh,
My
okay.
apologies.
No
I'm
problem.
sorry.
Yep.
Thank you.
No problem. John, how about you? Can you read?
Sure, just 1.6, right?
Please.
Okay. One evening during his midnight session, the Blessed One entered a state of deep absorption known as the army of the Buddha's adornments.
The array.
Army. Array. Yeah, thank you. Sorry. One evening during his midnight session, the Blessed One entered a state of deep absorption known as the array of the Buddha's adornments. The moment he entered into the state of absorption, the ray of light known as the light of wisdom, free from attachment, that arouses the memory of the Buddhas of past time, shone forth from his head's crown extension. Illuminating all the pure realms, the light attracted Maheshvara and innumerable other gods. From the mass of light that radiated from the thus gone one, the following verses of exhortation arose.
Okay, great. So we can picture, here's the great Buddha sitting, and from his meditation, from his head, metaphorically, is all this streaming forth. So Kunga, would you read 1.7 to 1.9?
Come commune with the sage, the lion of the Sakya, sublime, supremely brilliant and pure. The light of wisdom, he radiates, dispels darkness. Peaceful in form, his mind is virtuous and tranquil. Take as your master the one with natural mastery of the Dharma, an ocean of wisdom with power both vast and pure. The sovereign of the Dharma, the all-knowing lord of sages, a god of gods, revered by gods and human alike. Go before the peaceful one, the one who is liberated, who has mastered those minds that are difficult to tame, and whose mind is free from the snares of Mara. For seeing him and hearing him is not without benefit. With supreme devotion go, all of you, before the one who is peerless in illuminating the Dharma, who dispels darkness and shows the sublime way, with peaceful conduct and knowledge infinite in scope. As the king of doctors, he dispenses divine nectar, conquering the evil horde with his courageous eloquence. He is a friend of the Dharma and knows the ultimate. He is peerless guide who illuminates the path.
Very good. Thank you. So he's speaking kind of in the third person, isn't he? He's telling all these folks, he says, well, this is who I am, but he's doing it in the third person. This is what I represent. This is who I am. This is who you should be, inviting into yourself. This is who you should be following. This is the example that you have. Any comments? Anybody see that?
So, what caught me is the reference to the extension from his crown and the line, "As the king of doctors, he dispenses the divine nectar." There are many references throughout, like sutras, and even in Hinduism and other Eastern religions like Shinto and Taoism that reference divine nectar. So I think it's very interesting that um, Vajrayana is still aligned in this way, and that divine nectar can actually be a sensation that you feel pouring straight into your head, and with visualization, you can actually feel its expansion inside of you, making you one with the universe. So I think I don't know, it's just really interesting that it points out the divine nectar. I don't know. I don't know if anyone else has experienced that.
Well, this is the medicine Buddha. He's describing that because the medicine Buddha is an activity of Buddha, and in his left hand he's holding the bowl of Dharma elixir. And so much of our illnesses, so much of our confusions and so on is caused by our negativity, by our confusion. And it's the elixir, the Dharma elixir, that illuminates that and becomes the cure, becomes the medicine to be able to overcome so much of our illnesses and so on. So this is the work of the medicine Buddha, the Buddha who heals. So that reference, and the top knot, that if you look in the Tibetan Buddhas, they have a top knot, and that indicates their teaching, the Usnisha it's called. Their divine teaching is symbolized by that top knot. So if you look at an image of a Tibetan Buddha statue or a Thangka painting or whatever, you'll always notice that's there.
I did not know that. That's very interesting and useful information. Thank you.
Yeah, you won't see that in Southeast Asia Buddhas. You won't see it in some of the Hindi Buddhas, but it's always in the Tibetan Buddhas. Any other comments? Do you find that interesting? Is this exhortation, as it was just called, is this similar to things that you might read in other holy books and other traditions? Maybe not exactly in these words, but a declaration that there is this sublime, divine, whatever you want to call it, being who is bringing these ideas to you, bringing this instruction to you, to bring this example to you. Tashi, you turned on your microphone?
Yeah.
Did you want to say something? Did you want to say something?
No, it's been on.
Oh, okay. I didn't know if you wanted to say something.
Oh, no, I didn't have anything to say.
Okay.
At least not yet.
But like in the Gospels in the Bible, in the Western Bible, it's like that. And I don't know, if it appears in other books. I'm sure it does. Does anybody have a comment about that?
My attention was caught earlier when I heard of the Bodhisattvas being able to walk on water, which sounds very much like something out of the New Testament. So makes you wonder.
Yeah, many of the references were shared or spontaneously shared. Okay. All right. Well, let's go back to the book. Let's go back to 1.12. And Matt, would you read the rest of this page, 112, 113, and 114, please? 114 goes over to the next page. If you'll continue through those three groups there, please.
Sure. Struck by the light of wisdom free from attachment, which arouses the memory of the Buddhas of times past, the gods of the pure realms were inspired by these verses and immediately arose from their tranquil absorptions. Through the power of the Buddha, they recalled the blessed Buddhas of innumerable and incalculable eons, remembering the qualities of the Buddha realms of each blessed Buddha, as well as the retinue that surrounded the Buddhas and the teachings they gave. That night, just as people went to bed, the gods of the pure realms visited the Blessed One. Among them were Ishvara, Maheshvara, Nanda, Sunanda, Kandanda, Mahita, Prasanta, I'm gonna leave that one alone, and many other gods of the pure realms. With their brilliant colors, they illuminated the entirety of Jeta Grove with a divine light. They prostrated to the Blessed One, placing their heads at his feet, and then stood to one side, supplicating him with the following words. Blessed One, there is an extensive collection of discourses on the Dharma that bears the name Lalitavistara, the play in full. This teaching illuminates the basic virtues of the Bodhisattvas, showing how the Bodhisattva descended from the sublime place in the heaven of joy, intentionally entered the womb and sojourned in the womb. It shows the power of the place where he was born to a noble family and how he surpassed others through all the superior special qualities that he demonstrated through his actions as a youth. It shows his many unique qualities, such as his skills in arts, crafts, writing, arithmetic, calculations, astrology, fencing, archery, feats of physical strength, and wrestling, demonstrating his superiority to all other beings in these areas. It shows how he enjoyed his retinue of consorts and the pleasures of his kingdom.
So it's showing him as a human being, you know, a human being who has great blessings, who has great karma. You know, he didn't get these things accidentally. You know, he got these things because in prior lives, he had gone through his vicissitudes, his changes of being a human being and so on. And so he has developed and cultivated, if you will, this karma that he has now in this life to become a Buddha, to become awakened, to be able to liberate himself from all the things that cause a human being to be pulled back into the ocean of suffering, that he was able to attain this nirvana, this surpassing the ocean of suffering.
Can I make a comment real quick?
Please.
One thing that I feel like there's something, for me at least, that is lost a bit in like the Mahayana descriptions or Vajrayana descriptions, or maybe scriptures, some, although I haven't read a ton of the scriptures, where it's like when the Buddha becomes kind of like superhuman. Like, I know you were just describing that as a human being, but it's kind of like he was the best at everything he's ever done, and he was amazing, and he came down and he had a miraculous birth, and he was already enlightened and came down. And I know it's kind of this whole worldview that's based around it, and it makes sense. But I think for me also, there's something lost of part of what was so attractive to me about Buddhism coming to it, or something it was really inspiring to me about it, was the Buddha being like the humanness of the Buddha, the suffering of the Buddha, and then that transformation and going on the journey, and then, like, you know, that he was like the regularness of the Buddha, if we're going to call it that. I mean, I know he was like a prince, and obviously he was a special being, but that was part of what is like so inspiring to me.
Well, yeah, and I think, you know, it said in the beginning, and I think you actually read it when you were reading, you read from the introduction, and it said that, you know, this is a lot of metaphor. You know, there's a lot of mythology here. Is being mixed with what we might call, you know, reality of being an ordinary human being or something like that. But we have to look at it in a way, you know, and understanding the culture of the time, and being able to blend that with what we recognize in modern times as being truth or reality and something like that. But then but to always hold in mind that there is this transcendence that is possible that we can never exclude. Just because we can't hold it in our hand, just because we can't weigh it, just because we can't see it, doesn't mean that it's not within the scope of being awakened in this divine way, in this holy way. And we can experience that through our transcendent meditations and so on. And then we come back from that, we have that experience, and we come back and we say, I just had this experience, but I can't explain it. So we have to keep that open mind all the time, I think. This is what's helping us, you see, to be ready for that, to prepare ourselves. The first time it may happen to us, we may have a moment of disbelief, a moment of doubt, and it's gone, because that doubt just pulls us right out of it. And you say, "Oh, silly me. There it was, and I blew it off. Let me go back into that experience. Let me do that again, and maybe I won't do that. I will have overcome my doubt, and I will allow myself to experience that nature, that true nature that is beyond words, beyond conception. I won't try and qualify it." Does that make sense, Matt?
Yeah. It makes sense.
I mean, this is what we're preparing ourselves for, is to have that kind of experience, to be that.
Yeah. And and it's just, there's different frameworks and ways of viewing things that I think are all true on certain levels, are likely all true from different perspectives or vantage points when it comes to different ways of talking about the Buddha and his life or his story and everything you're talking about as well. And what you're saying makes sense. And I think coming from the other perspective too, of having like a more human idea of the Buddha, to me also represents carrying that, holding that as that other side of it as well, holding them both together is like, it's more like, well, I can have these experiences, or maybe this experience I have can be profound or something, rather than it being like, well, I'm not that kind of being. I'm not like I'm not I didn't descend. I wasn't born miraculously. I don't know, something like that. I'm not sure if what I'm saying, it's been a long day. I don't know.
Well, let me ask everybody, do you find that to be a limiting idea, concept of what it is, or do you find it to be a liberating idea?
Well, I'm just going to jump in. I understand what you're saying, in that when Buddha Shakyamuni was born the last time, it's partially it's reality, it's culture. He was this being that was perfectly, but not exactly, right? So he comes here and he gets stuffed into a baby. Babies don't have brains that work really well, right? So he has to grow up. But also, this was his last rebirth. And I think there were other things he had to accomplish. He was not
Well,
like,
was that his fate, or was it his destiny?
I don't
Was he fated? Was he fated to do that?
Was it his choice?
Correct.
He took his last rebirth. I think that, I think Poe is right. I think that as you become more and more realized, you'll have more control over what happens when you die. And he was very close, but he wanted to come back. And he wanted to accomplish something. He wasn't perfect. He still had to accomplish it. I think you're right. He was born, and yes, he's this amazing, amazing creature. But he lived a life of ease and slotted into the life of a prince. You know, he wasn't just this smug kid that always had the answers. And when, you know, he did what you're supposed to do.
Well, maybe he did. Maybe he did. Maybe he was smug. Maybe he went through the brat stage.
Well, he probably did for a very short time. For some reason, he was pretty good at it. But again, like he didn't formulate a plan to liberate us all until he was able to sneak out of the palace and see reality for what it was and see suffering. And he got transfixed by that suffering, and that woke him up.
Right. He made a choice to see the other side.
He made a choice to feel responsible, that he needed to figure out how to make this stop because beings were suffering. You know, he was, I can't remember where I read it, but at some point he was just sitting there talking to people, and he's like, oh yeah, there's this time in a lifetime, other lifetime, where I was hanging out and people were fishing, and somebody took, you know, they caught a fish and it was laying there on the sand, the hot sand coming out of a cool river and dying and flipping around. And I thought it was freaking hysterical that this fish was just flopping around. And the truth was it was suffocating to death in hot sand and not having a good time. And he said, I finally, like, I've done, you know, it's like I've neutralized that karma. There were things he was accomplishing. I think you're right. I don't think he was just this, you know, like, you know, like smirky little kid. I think he had work to do. And then when he left, he was out there for what, 7 years, suffering in the most bizarre ways. He was attaining it, right? I think you're right.
Yeah, I think this is the trap that people get caught up in, you know, with, is Buddhism a philosophy or is it a religion of some divine being? You know, and a lot of people who call themselves Buddhists and, you know, go to Buddhist ceremonies and things like that, but they're looking at it more as this superstitious kind of religion, that if they don't do this, you know, terrible things are going to happen to them. And if they do these things, miraculous things are going to happen to them. And instead of learning that this is all a lesson, this is a play for us to be able to see ourselves on this stage, to be able to purify ourselves.
Yeah, you know, I think, and again, I can't remember where I read it. Somebody made the point that, you know, when Buddhism becomes a dominant, let's just say religion, when Buddhism becomes the dominant philosophy or religion in a culture, then you end up with sort of this responsibility to teach ordinary people who are not going to study, you know, some sense of morality. And in every Buddhist society, they've had to do that.
Well, that's the first part of the teachings.
Well, it is, but it's also, these are people who are never going to be taught at all. I mean,
Well, maybe so.
yeah, Tibet is a very good example. I think it was Kempo that said, you know, if you don't go to a nunnery or a monastery to get some sort of an education, you don't know anything about Buddhism.
In the old country, in the old world.
Right, you know how to say "Oh, many Pemi Hong," and you know, if somebody needs a puja, you'll go and ask for a puja, but they're not taught.
Well, let me point something out. I mean, if you look at the cover of the books that we're looking at, this is TOH, this is the Tibetan section, number 95. So what about section number 1, section number 2, section number 3, and everything? They are steeped in the Vinaya. And the Vinaya are the morality disciplines, teachings of the Buddha. So in this way, we did skip ahead because we can refer back to these discipline sections, but the discipline sections do come first. You got to have a set of discipline way of looking at things to be able to get to and accept these teachings that are here in the play of life.
Can I mention something, Lance?
Sure.
I think that reading these types of things about, light rays talking and so forth, I think from a materialistic point of view, it doesn't make any sense. And really, if materialism were true, Buddhism wouldn't make any sense, But if you look at it as the mind, it's the nature of mind, it's the mind's projection, and it's very malleable. These things are very sensible, I think, from that perspective.
Yeah,
And
you're
that's
absolutely right.
the Buddha had, yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yes.
Hey,
We're
Lance.
opening ourselves up to the spirituality of being a human being, because these are spiritual metaphors that are being expressed in that way that we were saying. In the physical sense, it doesn't exist. In the intellectual sense, it doesn't exist. But in the spiritual sense, there's no boundaries. Somebody was going to say something. Somebody put their hand up.
Yeah,
Yes, Gunga.
Lance,
Yeah, I just wanted to
ask this question about, is this the same Buddha that was 2,500 years ago?
Of course, yes.
Okay, now, my understanding and my belief structure is that that he was a prince. He grew up as a prince. He was kept away from any kind of pain or anything like that, suffering. And when he finally got out and he saw pain and suffering, then he started going around the villages and areas that he had to try to find out, I know that there's suffering. What's the cause of suffering? And he worked on his four points there, but he was just as plain as you or I before he sat under the Bodhi tree. And when he sat under the Bodhi tree, there was some exceptional things going on.
Yes, I agree with that.
And it was not only mental, it was physical, and whatever.
Yes.
He made large strides and changes
Yes.
that Bodhi tree. And I'm reading this here and I'm looking at this here, and this was probably made 400 or 500 years after his death. And we're looking at something that people really wish this was true, or maybe 99% of this is true, but not to be withholding the real facts of what had happened before he got his enlightenment.
Yes. Thank you. Well, let me. Gil had his hand up. Gil or Christy had their hand up. Let's see what they have to say about this. But you make a very good point, William. Thank you very much. Gil, did you want to say something?
I did, but it's been so long now that I don't think it makes any point.
Well, that's up to you. We'd love to hear what you have to say.
Well, it was just, you were talking about Buddhism being a philosophy or Buddhism being a religion.
Yes.
We left out that it is a science.
Okay.
if you follow the instructions, if you take the water to 200 degrees, 212 degrees, it will boil. If
Yes.
you follow the path, you will do this. So,
Yes.
so there's also that fact that I didn't think we mentioned. But that's what I wanted to say.
Do you think that, physical nature, having this science to it, that if you boil water, bring it to the right temperature, it's going to boil, so on, it's going to make steam. But can you say the same thing about somebody who's meditating? If we teach somebody, we show somebody the way to meditate, here's the method to meditate. Can you guarantee that they're going to be able to attain enlightenment? Are they going to be able to attain liberation? In the same way, are the science of bringing water to boil and you'll make steam? That you can guarantee. Can you guarantee spirituality?
According to this guy,
Yeah. Who's that?
this is Dujam Lingpa. According to Dujam Lingpa, you can do it in 1 year.
Okay.
Now, but that's him, and I don't know. But I'll tell you, one of the things that draws me to this, or that has made this so solid for me, is the science of it. Is that people are don't just stand up there and babble stuff. They talk about specific things over and over and over and over. Different people saying the same thing over and over, the same things. So it sounds like there is a consistency here that I can count on. Even a person as dull as I am can possibly profit, and I have profited from the little bit I have been able to garner. So I am happy for it.
Well, good. Thank you. I think we're all happy that you'll be able to do that, and I think you're right. I think that there is a formula, if you will, but included in that formula is devotion and compassion. There's qualities that you can't measure, that you can't put on a scale or something like that, and that's what makes it different. Does anybody else have a thought about that? And Kunga wanted to say something, so I want to get back to Kunga. Debbie, did you want to make a point? Did you want to answer that question?
Wait. If you think I was talking about science without compassion,
I don't know.
I did not make myself clear. So thank you.
From the perspective of a non-scientist, it seems to be contradictory. From the perspective of a scientist, it's not. I don't know, maybe you should try and write a book about it and talk to people and interview people. There's a contradiction that you see that isn't there. There are so many scientists that are Buddhists because science is a way of training yourself to see any, logic and reason. And it's funny actually, because Kenpo, we talk about that. It's like, why study science? I'm like, it teaches you logic and reason. It is a way to see reality. And, the distinction between science and spirituality doesn't exist. It is true that if you want to study the science of something, so I don't know, randomly, what happens if I throw this pencil across the room? It's predictable. There's all these equations, but science trains your brain to see reality, to see it, to act on it. It trains you to see. It trains you to think. A scientist has a spiritual life, and there are several, author, I can't remember his name, There's several authors who have written, and a lot of scientists are Buddhists because there's no contradiction. But it's not easy for a scientist to explain why we see no contradiction. Like, I don't really know how to put that yet. But they're not, it's understood that, you know, you can't just, like, if you take a human being and sit him down and teach him the Dharma, he should achieve a certain amount of, you know, realization in a lifetime. No, but when you're when you're looking and analyzing the words of the Buddha and, you know, the words, the teachings, when you're in meditation, trying to understand reality, when you are generating bodhicitta, there's science helps. I'm sorry, but it does.
Okay. Kunga, you wanted to say something?
Thank you. Yeah, when Matt was talking about this idea of you know, trying to I'm going to paraphrase what I think he was trying to say. Trying to bring together this eye of the historical story of the Buddha with this Mahayana viewpoint of a bigger perspective that seems to take in a lot of supernatural ideas, you know, for a Western mind. I think of that like you were mentioning about this idea between our mundane reality and our spiritual reality, our ultimate reality, and these scriptures like this one in the Lotus Sutra and the Diamond Sutra and some of the other sutras, Avantamsaka, they do a great job of trying to bring that ultimate reality into the mundane reality in a way so that you can through the art you can experience it. And Matt said something about, you know, the story that we're reading talks about the Buddha having a miraculous birth, but his birth wasn't miraculous. But I would say that's what it's trying to challenge, that belief that we don't think all our experiences are miraculous. You know, that there is this miraculous thing to being alive as a human being. And part of what these stories I think do is they kind of try to bring that into the story, that miraculous thing that you maybe, you know, especially we in the West have a hard time seeing and experience. And so that's what I've noticed in the sutras that I've read. That's how I kind of take it. They're really expansive sense of time and space, innumerable bodhisattvas, more Buddhas than atoms and Buddha universes than atoms. And you just can't even imagine the extent of time and space that's being communicated in these sutras. And that's the point, right? It's like there's so much more to perceive in reality beyond what we can perceive. You know, we're constantly building tools to allow us to see things that are smaller and things that are farther away. And those should keep telling us that, you know, our perception is so limited. So I think these sutras are a great way through art to show us that bigger perspective on life. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's super, super helpful. That framing of it that you're talking about. Thank you so much for that.
Oh, the guy. This was a good book.
Who is that? Who's the author of that? What's that say?
Alan Wallace.
Who, Alan Wallace?
Alan Wallace.
No. There's I talk about him often, is Ken Wilber. And he was trained as a doctor of chemistry or whatever. And so the techniques that he learned through the science of chemistry, in applying the science of chemistry, he applied those types of structure to identifying spirituality. And he's considered by many people to be the preeminent philosopher of our time, or at least one of them. He's my age, you know, so he's written, I don't know how many books, maybe 20 books or something like that. And so anyway, so there's somebody who's taken the science and tried to apply it to science, to apply it to spirituality, and it was very useful for me. You know, it helped me to understand things.
I think for me, the idea of the Buddha as a scientist is a scientist, physician, something like that was always powerful to me. And I think where in my view at least, where it can go astray is when we're conflating like science with whatever particular scientific a view that's in vogue in science right now, or in vogue probably for good reason, but or different, whatever the scientific worldview is now, and then how do we smash these two views together or something. I think of the Buddha more as a scientist in the sense of, which to me was so radical about a form of spirituality that was like this, was that he's an empiricist, that he had a certain kind, he found something out about reality and about suffering and about the nature of consciousness, and then lays out, here's a way to run the experiment yourself to see if you can, it's not a faith-based thing. Here are the steps that you can take. Here's the path and see if it alleviates your suffering or not. To me, the spirit of that and the empiricism of that is very much in the spirit of the scientific method, more in a way that analogy is very powerful for me.
Oh, that's beautiful.
I was gonna say, like really quickly, like Debbie, I was listening to you, and I'll just be really succinct because of time. But I would say I would call myself a behavioral engineer, a behavioral scientist. And Debbie, to your point and to Matt's point, the reason why Buddhism is for me so easy for me, and using that framework, is because it is so logical, parsimonious, technological, replicable. And spiritual cause and effect is like environmental cause and effect. There's an antecedent, behavior, and consequence, which is what karma is. And once you understand really what karma is and are paying attention, it becomes very predictable, these patterns of suffering. And I think that's the greatest contribution, is understanding what karma is intellectually, but then putting it into practice as action bodhicitta. And that, for me, as a behavioral person who subscribes to environmental cause and effect, I can say for sure spiritual cause and effect is real, and I get it from a scientific paradigm. It's very easy to understand.
That's very good, very practical. Thank you.
Yeah.
Alex has his hand up. He wanted to say something.
Thank you. I thought you might want to hear from another chemist scientist.
Okay.
My degree is actually in chemistry, although now I'm doing like neuroscience and microscopy, more like physics. I think we should keep in mind that like until year of Renaissance, 1500s, like science and religion were together, were one and the same. The same people in monasteries or temples, they were counting stars, they were making observations. It was the same. It's just in very recently, quote unquote, couple hundred years ago, we decided to separate, and this gets that part of money, that get that part of money. These guys have their, one way of thinking, and these guys have the other. But it's more like artificial separation, and the artificial separation is where the scientific method comes in, and you have to do something, verify, make it several times, make sure it reproduces, and make sure other people can do the same thing reproducibly. So in that way, that's what science is, and that's how I was taught. To me, Buddhism is scientific in a way that kind of in metaphysical way, more concretely, that like there is one person did certain meditation methods, practices, achieved enlightenment. He taught it other people did follow his steps, they got their result, and looks like people getting the same result over like more than 2000 years in a row. So in that sense, Buddhism is scientific, but like the way it's done, it's unique. Each person is unique. Each person that experiment can never be replicated. So it is each person's path. It's more like an art rather than science, because it's a unique expression of that person's path. Although the methods, like artists, they use the same method. They say they know if you mix this and this paint, you get this color. Like you mix red and blue, you get purple. Any artist can reproduce it. That's science, but what they do with these colors is very different, very unique to each of them. I'm just want to throw in this kind of monkey, and the other one regarding the lights that Buddha have seen. It could be put in the question, but I think these days not so much. We hear Congress discussing like aliens, lights in the sky, glowing spheres that pilots have seen, over and over, interfering with the activities. So I'd say, hell, like if Buddha was there meditating, maybe all these powerful aliens came to see him and say, let's see what you want, what you can teach us, and they used to call them gods, we call them super aliens,
all right, well, we got to wrap it up here, but I think, these questions we're not going to answer tonight, 100% or anything, but I think we're opening the many doors here that are going to have more, echoes of what we're saying as we move along with this in the coming weeks and months, and as we discuss this. So it's all very interesting and all very good. I like what the question that Gil brought up, citing this particular teacher, saying you could do this in a lifetime or a year or whatever it was. And there's lots of teachers like that, and not only Buddhist teachers, but Christian teachers and Jewish teachers and so on and so on, and that's all good. It's not bad at all. I think we can talk about this later. I don't want to go on about it, but I think that there has to be a certain devotion to want to do that. There's certain qualities about it that you have to bring to the equation, to the experiment, to make it happen. If you just do it vicariously, if you just do it straight from the book without that emotional transference, maybe emotional is the wrong word, the spiritual connection to it, it's not going to have the result that you want. So anyway, that we can leave for another conversation. I made myself a note, and we can talk about that next time. But we'll pick up where we've left off here at 1.15, and continue the conversation next week. Is this helpful?
Yeah, just to squeeze in a last word here, that I think, Lance, one of the most impactful things, there's all the teachings and everything, but has been seeing your devotion to the practice that you have in your life. That's as someone that I can relate to and doesn't feel like, someone that has life is similar to mine in some ways, that watching your devotion to your practice and hearing you talk about it has probably been the thing that's impacted me the most. So it's very appreciated and cool.
Well, thank you very much for saying that. Thank you.
I'll have to agree. But also everybody here.
Beg pardon?
I said I will have to agree, Lance. But also everybody here, I've learned so much from you.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, we're just conduits, it all comes from, it comes through the Buddha, is certainly the conduit that we're following, but the Buddha's not the only one. And the Buddha would tell you that.
All of you, yes. Thank you. Thank you for this evening.
All right. Well, thank you all very much. If anybody has a quick last word, otherwise we'll do our dedications. All right, so we'll go to our prayer book. I think it's page 37. Am I correct? 33. So we'll do the Kagyu lineage dedication prayer. So everybody, somebody, who was the Umze today? It was Kunga. Kunga, would you recite the Kagyu lineage prayer and the Dekorma prayer, 33 to 35, please?
Dorjajang, Tilopa, Naropa, Marpa, Milarepa, Dharma Lagampopa, Vagmaropa, and Lord Drikungpa, please bestow upon us the most auspicious blessings of all the Kagyu Lamas. By this virtue may I achieve omniscience, by defeating all enemies, confusion. May all who travel in the waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death cross the ocean of samsara. Bodhicitta, the excellent and precious mind, where it is unborn, may it arise. Where it is born, may it not decline, but ever increase higher and higher. I pray that the Lama may have good health. I pray that the Lama may have a long life. I pray that your Dharma activities spread far and wide. I pray that I may not be separated from you. As Manjushri the warrior realized the ultimate state, and at the Samantabhadra, I will follow in their path and fully dedicate all their merit for all sentient beings. By the blessings of the Buddha who attained the three kayas, by the blessings of the truth of the unchanging Dharma as such, by the blessing of the indivisible Sangha order, may the merit I share bear fruit. By the virtues collected in the three times by myself and all beings in samsara and nirvana, and by the innate root of virtue, may I and all sentient beings quickly attain unsurpassed, perfect, complete, precious enlightenment. May the teachings of the great Drikungpa Ratanashri, who is omniscient Lord of the Dharma, master of the interdependence, continue and increase their study, practice, contemplation, and meditation until the end of samsara. Sarva Mangalam.
Om. Ah. Om. Om. Ah. Om. Om. Ah. Om. May my body, speech, and mind become inseparable with the body, speech, and mind of all the enlightened ones for the benefit of all beings. Thank you all very, very much for being here.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.